There are new bombshell claims today from royal insiders who say King Charles's cancer is incurable and he will likely die with the disease.
Sometimes the most unsettling royal moments do not arrive through ceremony, but through restraint. A quiet statement, a careful expression, and a family standing too still can say more than any palace announcement. And now, reports surrounding King Charles III's health have raised a difficult question. Is the monarchy preparing emotionally for a heavier future than the public has been told? According to recent royal commentary, Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, are said to have faced a deeply serious moment connected to the king's health and the growing pressure around royal duties. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed the most dramatic claims being shared online, and any discussion of the monarch's medical condition must be treated carefully and respectfully. But the reason this story has captured so much attention is clear. It touches not only the health of a king, but the future rhythm of the crown itself. King Charles III is more than a public figure inside this story. He is the monarch, the father of the heir, the husband of Queen Camilla, and the man carrying an institution that has already passed through a period of extraordinary strain. When concerns about his health become part of the public conversation, the reaction is never limited to sympathy alone. People immediately begin asking what it means for duties, appearances, state responsibilities, and the emotional stability of the royal family. Because in a monarchy, the health of a sovereign is never only private. It becomes a national question, even when the family would rather keep it behind closed doors. That is what makes William's position so painful. He is not simply a son worried about his father. He is the future king, standing close enough to the throne to understand what every change in Charles's schedule may eventually mean. A cancelled engagement, a reduced workload, or a carefully worded update may look administrative to the public, but to William it may feel like the future moving closer before his heart is ready. And that is the first emotional conflict at the center of the story. How does a son grieve privately when the nation is already looking to him for steadiness? Catherine's role beside him is equally important. The Princess of Wales has often been seen as a calm presence in moments of uncertainty, someone who does not need many words to communicate reassurance. Her public strength has become part of the Wales family image. But if reports are accurate that she and William have been involved in difficult conversations around the king's health and future duties, then her position becomes far more than supportive. She becomes part of the emotional bridge between the current reign and the future one. That kind of role carries grace, but it also carries pressure. And then there is Queen Camilla, whose place in this moment must not be overlooked. Camilla stands closest to Charles in the daily reality of his life. She sees the fatigue, the adjustments, the moments the public never sees. Yet in any conversation about the future, attention naturally shifts toward William and Catherine. That does not mean Camilla's pain is smaller. It means her grief may be more complicated. She is both wife and queen, both companion and public figure, both protector of Charles's dignity and witness to a future slowly gathering around the next generation. This is where the story becomes more sensitive. When royal watchers speak about tragic news or a serious turn, they are not only reacting to health fears. They are reacting to what those fears may reveal about power, succession, and responsibility inside the House of Windsor. The monarchy is built to continue. It must always have an heir ready, a public face available, and a structure strong enough to survive personal sorrow. But families do not move as smoothly as institutions. A palace may prepare a schedule. A son prepares himself differently. Was this simply concern around the king's well-being, or was it the first sign of a deeper adjustment already beginning inside royal circles? That question matters because Charles's reign has always carried a sense of transition. He waited longer than any previous Prince of Wales to become monarch, and when he finally reached the throne, he inherited not only duty but division, public scrutiny, and the emotional aftershocks of family conflict. His reign was never going to be simple, but health concerns add another layer. They forced the country to look at the monarchy not as a distant symbol, but as a human institution carried by bodies that tire, families that worry, and heirs who must prepare even while hoping preparation will not be needed too soon. For older royal viewers especially, there is something deeply moving about this moment. Many have watched Charles since childhood, first as a young prince, then as heir, then as king. His life has unfolded almost entirely in public, shaped by expectation, criticism, endurance, and finally sovereignty. To hear reports suggesting that his health may be placing greater pressure on the family is not just another royal headline. It feels like watching the passage of an era become visible. But the palace must be careful. Too much detail could feel intrusive. Too little detail can invite speculation. A message that sounds too hopeful may later be judged misleading. A message that sounds too grave may alarm the nation. This is the narrow path Buckingham Palace must walk whenever a monarch's health becomes part of public concern. The institution must protect privacy while preserving trust. And that is not easy when every silence is analyzed and every appearance is treated as evidence. William and Catherine, if they are being positioned more prominently in this moment, carry a delicate responsibility. They must reassure without appearing to replace. They must support Charles without making his reign seem diminished. They must show readiness without seeming eager for authority. That is one of the hardest balances in royal life, because succession is both necessary and emotionally uncomfortable. The crown requires continuity, but the family experiences that continuity through fear, loyalty, and love. That is why the emotional symbolism of this story is so strong. It is not simply about one health update or one reported palace conversation. It is about a father, a son, a wife, a daughter-in-law, and a country watching for signs of what comes next. It is about the gap between official language and private feeling. It is about the painful truth that monarchy is designed to survive the very moments families wish they could pause. So the first layer of this story is not a confirmed medical revelation, because the most dramatic claims remain unverified. The first layer is the pressure surrounding the people closest to the king. Charles must protect his dignity. Camilla must carry her private concern in public. William must prepare without appearing to step ahead. Catherine must steady the future while respecting the present. And once that pressure is understood, the deeper question becomes impossible to ignore. If the king's health is forcing even quiet adjustments behind palace doors, then who is truly carrying the weight of the crown day by day? To understand why this moment feels so important, we have to look at what may have been quietly building long before the latest reports reach the public. To understand why this moment feels so important, we have to look at what may have been quietly building long before the latest reports reach the public. Because royal health stories rarely begin at the moment the country hears them. They begin earlier, in adjusted diaries, shortened appearances, carefully protected travel plans, and the quiet awareness that a monarch's strength is being measured not only by doctors, but by every duty he is still expected to carry. That is why concern around King Charles's health cannot be separated from the working life of the monarchy. A king does not simply attend events. He gives continuity to the system. He receives state papers, holds audiences, represents the country at symbolic moments, supports national ceremonies, and gives the public a sense that the institution remains steady. When any part of that rhythm changes, even for understandable reasons, the palace must decide how much to explain, how much to protect, and how much responsibility should quietly move toward the next generation. Reports suggest that royal observers have been paying close attention not only to what Charles has done in public, but to the way duties around him appear to be managed. A lighter schedule, a carefully paced appearance, or a greater role for William at key moments may all have practical explanations. But in royal life, practical changes quickly become symbolic. The public does not only ask whether the king is resting. It asks whether the heir is being prepared more visibly. It asks whether the institution is adjusting before it has said so directly. And it asks whether the monarchy is trying to reassure the nation without revealing the full emotional strain behind the scenes. This is where William's position becomes more complicated than it may look from the outside. To the public, his increased visibility can appear natural, even reassuring. He is the Prince of Wales. He is expected to step forward. But to William himself, every added responsibility connected to his father's health may carry a private sting. A duty taken from Charles is not just an opportunity for the heir. It is a reminder that the king's body may be asking for limits the crown has always been reluctant to show. That is a painful contradiction. The monarchy needs William to look ready. A son may wish he did not have to look ready yet. Catherine's role deepens that contradiction. She is not simply standing beside William as a royal partner. She is helping shape the image of continuity at the very moment continuity may feel fragile behind palace doors. Her calm becomes part of the public message, whether she intends it or not. If she appears composed, the nation feels steadier. If she looks concerned, people read meaning into that too. The Princess of Wales is often placed in the delicate position of reassuring the public without speaking too directly, of offering emotional steadiness while carrying pressures that are rarely described in full. And if royal commentators are correct that William and Catherine have been drawn more closely into conversations around the king's duties, then the stakes become even higher. This is no longer only about health. It becomes about trust. Who does Charles trust to carry the public mood if his own strength must be protected? Who does the palace believe can speak without alarming the country? Who can stand close enough to the future without making the present monarch appear diminished? Those are not small questions inside the House of Windsor. They touch the hidden machinery of royal power. Queen Camilla's position sits at the center of that machinery in a different way. She is Charles's wife, his daily companion, and the person most emotionally tied to the private reality of his condition. Yet when the conversation turns to succession, public reassurance, and future leadership, attention naturally moves toward William and Catherine. That shift can be necessary and still painful. It can be institutionally sensible and emotionally difficult. Camilla may support the king's dignity, while also feeling the quiet discomfort of watching the palace's center of gravity move toward the Wales household. This is not a simple struggle between people. It is a struggle between roles. A wife wants privacy and protection for her husband. A son wants honesty and time. An heir must prepare. A monarchy must continue. A palace staff must plan. The public wants reassurance. And the king himself, if the reports are accurate in tone if not in every detail, must carry the most impossible burden of all, remaining a symbol of strength while allowing others to see enough truth to keep trust alive. That is why palace language matters so much in health stories. Words like treatment, recovery, adjustment, reduced duties, or continued work are never neutral when they concern a monarch. They are chosen to calm the public, protect privacy, and avoid panic, but they also leave space for interpretation. If the palace says too little, people suspect concealment. If it says too much, it may feel undignified or alarming. And in the space between privacy and reassurance, speculation grows. For Charles, this balance is especially sensitive because his reign is still relatively young in historical terms. He waited decades to serve as king, and when his moment finally arrived, it came with enormous expectation. Many people wanted to see what kind of monarch he would become after a lifetime of preparation. Yet health concerns place that preparation under a different light. They ask whether the reign will be defined by personal conviction, by careful transition, or by the increasing visibility of the next generation. That possibility is what makes the story feel larger than one difficult update. If William and Catherine are becoming more central in moments of national reassurance, then royal watchers may begin to see a gradual emotional transfer taking place. Not a formal transfer of the crown, and not a replacement of Charles, but a subtle shift in public dependence. The people may still look to the king with respect, but they may increasingly look to the Waleses for steadiness. That is a profound change, because monarchy is built not only on law, but on where the public places its trust. And trust can move before titles do. The palace understands this better than anyone. It knows that a single appearance can calm a week of rumors. It knows that a carefully chosen photograph can speak more softly than a statement. It knows that when William walks into a room representing his father, the public sees both loyalty and preparation. And when Catherine stands beside him, the image becomes even stronger, the future not rushing forward, but quietly accepting more weight. But was this really about preparing the public, or was it about preparing the family itself? That is the question section 2 leaves open, because the deeper pressure may not come from newspapers or commentators. It may come from inside the royal household, where every changed schedule, every delegated duty, and every carefully worded update forces the family to confront what they may not yet be ready to say aloud. Charles remains king. William remains heir. Catherine remains the calm beside him. Camilla remains the wife closest to the private truth. But if the burden of daily reassurance is already shifting, then the next part of the story moves into far more sensitive territory. Who inside the palace is willing to accept that shift, and who may find it impossible to bear? That question moves the story into one of the most sensitive areas of royal life, because succession is never only a matter of law. It is also a matter of emotion, habit, influence, and the quiet acceptance that power inside a palace can begin moving before anyone publicly names it. And if the king's health has created even the possibility of a greater role for William and Catherine, then the question becomes not simply who is ready, but who is prepared to let the old order begin changing. This is where the hidden pressure begins to show. A monarchy is designed to continue smoothly, but the people inside it do not experience continuity as a neat constitutional process. They experience it through changed rooms, altered calls, different advisors entering first, and decisions that once belonged to one person slowly being carried by another. To the public, these changes may appear calm and controlled. Inside the royal household, they can feel deeply personal. A schedule adjustment is not only a schedule adjustment when it signals that the king must conserve his strength. A duty passed to the heir is not only a practical solution when it reminds everyone that time is moving. For William, this may be the most difficult contradiction of all. The institution needs him to step forward with confidence, but his private instinct as a son may be to resist the meaning of every step. No heir wants to inherit emotional responsibility through illness. No son wants to see his father become a question around which officials begin planning. And yet the Prince of Wales cannot simply stand still. The more the monarchy needs reassurance, the more his role becomes visible. The more visible he becomes, the more the public begins to imagine the future with him at the center. That is the quiet transfer nobody has to announce. Catherine's place in that transfer is just as important, though it works differently. She is not the heir, but she helps make the heir appear steady. Her presence softens the harshness of transition. It gives the public an image of continuity that feels calm rather than abrupt. Royal observers often understand this instinctively. When Catherine stands beside William, the future does not look like a sudden replacement. It looks like a family preparing to carry more, carefully and respectfully. That is why her role in any health-related announcement or difficult royal moment carries such symbolic force. But symbolism can create tension of its own. Queen Camilla may understand better than anyone that public focus can shift quickly during a health crisis. She has stood beside Charles through years of judgment, acceptance, and eventual recognition. As queen, she has a formal role, but as his wife, her connection is more intimate than any official position can express. If the public begins looking more urgently toward William and Catherine for steadiness, Camilla may not oppose that in principle, but the emotional weight of it could still be difficult. It is possible to accept what is necessary and still feel the pain of being moved slightly away from the center of reassurance. Some commentators might frame this as a power struggle, but the reality is likely more complicated. It may not be a battle of ambition. It may be a collision of grief, duty, and instinct. Camilla's instinct may be to protect Charles from appearing diminished. William's instinct may be to protect the crown from appearing unclear. Catherine's instinct may be to steady the family without turning suffering into spectacle. Charles's own instinct may be to continue as long as he can, while also preparing those who must one day carry what he cannot. And that is where the story becomes larger than health. Because when a monarch faces serious medical concern, the palace must answer questions it would rather postpone. How much work can the king safely continue? Which duties require his personal presence? Which duties can be delegated without causing alarm? Which appearances reassure the country, and which appearances risk exposing too much? These are not only diary questions. They are questions about authority. They decide how the crown is seen, how the heir is positioned, and how the public begins emotionally adjusting to a future that no one wants to rush. Historically, the monarchy has often handled these moments through careful staging and quiet delegation. The public is rarely shown the full machinery. It sees the finished image, the royal arriving, the statement released, the ceremony completed. But behind that image are decisions about health, stamina, optics, and timing. In the modern era, those decisions are harder to hide because the public has learned to read patterns. People notice shorter engagements. They notice fewer appearances. They notice when William is sent in place of Charles, or when Catherine stands beside him at a moment that feels heavier than usual. That kind of public awareness changes the palace's strategy. The royal family can no longer rely only on silence. It must create trust through careful honesty, but not so much honesty that privacy is destroyed. It must show enough preparation to calm people, but not so much that it appears to be quietly ushering Charles aside. This balance is extraordinarily delicate. One wrong tone could make the institution seem secretive, another could make it seem ruthless. And that is why William and Catherine's involvement, if reports are interpreted correctly, may be so significant. They are not only preparing for future duty, they are being used, or perhaps trusted, as emotional translators of the monarchy's next phase. Through them, the palace can suggest continuity without saying transition. It can show readiness without announcing urgency. It can reassure people that the future is stable while still honoring Charles as the present sovereign. But the more useful that image becomes, the more pressure it places on everyone around it. Camilla must watch the public slowly depend on the Waleses for steadiness. Charles must accept help without feeling that his reign is being overshadowed by preparation for what comes after. William must carry added authority without appearing to claim it too early. Catherine must remain calm while understanding that her calm is now part of the monarchy's survival language. This is the hidden dynamic that makes the story feel so consequential. The reported health concerns are not isolated from the future of the crown. They may be accelerating a shift that would have happened eventually, but under gentler circumstances. Instead of a slow ceremonial preparation, the family may be facing an emotional rehearsal shaped by uncertainty, concern, and the need to reassure a watching nation. And once that possibility enters the room, the story moves into far more dangerous territory. Because the real question is no longer whether William and Catherine can stand steady in a difficult moment. It is whether the palace is beginning to treat them as the emotional center of the monarchy while Charles is still king, and whether everyone inside the House of Windsor is ready for what that would mean. And that is where the pressure becomes impossible to ignore, because once the palace begins to rely on William and Catherine as the emotional center of reassurance, even quietly, the story moves beyond concern for King Charles's health and into the deeper question of royal authority. Not authority in the formal sense, because Charles remains the sovereign, but authority in the emotional sense, who the public looks to when the monarchy feels uncertain. That distinction matters enormously. A crown can sit on one head, while public confidence begins gathering around another household. It does not happen through one announcement or one dramatic decision. It happens through repeated moments. William attends where Charles cannot. Catherine stands beside him when the country needs calm. A statement from the palace mentions continuity, but the image people remember is the Prince and Princess of Wales walking forward together. Over time, that image can become more than support. It can become expectation. And expectation is one of the most powerful forces inside royal life. According to some royal commentators, this is the pressure now surrounding the House of Windsor. If the king's health has required adjustments behind the scenes, then every adjustment carries meaning beyond the diary. A postponed engagement may be compassionate. A delegated duty may be practical. A more visible William may be necessary. But together, those details can create the impression of a monarchy gradually preparing the public for a different balance. Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed the most dramatic claims being made about Charles's condition, but the conversation itself has already changed the atmosphere. People are no longer only asking how the king is doing. They are asking who is carrying the weight around him. For Charles, that question is painfully delicate. No monarch wants their health to become a measure of influence. No father wants his son's readiness to be discussed as a consequence of his own vulnerability. Yet the king also understands the demands of the crown. He spent most of his life as heir, waiting in the shadow of a sovereign who defined duty for an entire age. He knows that monarchy is never allowed to pause simply because the people inside it are suffering. The institution must continue, even when the continuation hurts. That is why Charles's public dignity matters so much. If he appears too little, concern grows. If he appears too much, people may worry that he is being pushed beyond what is wise. If he allows William to take on more, some will see thoughtful preparation. Others may read it as a sign of decline. The king is trapped between the need to reassure and the need to protect himself. And in that narrow space, every choice becomes symbolic. William faces the same symbolism from the opposite direction. When he steps forward, he must do so without seeming to step over his father. He must show readiness without ambition, strength without impatience, command without coldness. That is a difficult performance, and it may be one of the defining tests of his life as heir. The public may want to see him prepared, but they will also watch closely for any sign that preparation has become power. Catherine's presence helps soften that tension, but it also increases the significance of the moment. The Princess of Wales does not simply make William look supported. She gives the future monarchy a more complete shape. Her calmness, her family image, her connection to public service, and her long association with steadiness all help make transition feel less frightening. Yet that very usefulness places her under extraordinary pressure. If the country begins to see her as part of the answer to royal uncertainty, then her every appearance becomes part of the monarchy's emotional strategy. Was this simply a natural response to a difficult family situation, or was it the beginning of a wider institutional recalibration? That is the question royal observers may now be watching closely. Because a recalibration does not require dramatic language. It can appear through seating arrangements, briefing patterns, representation at major events, the order in which announcements are made, or the faces chosen to stand before the public at sensitive moments. These are small details to casual viewers, but inside a palace, small details often reveal where confidence is moving. Queen Camilla's position becomes especially sensitive here. As the king's wife, she is closest to the private emotional reality. But the more the institution leans on William and Catherine for national reassurance, the more Camilla may find herself in a complicated public place. Her role is intimate, loyal, and central to Charles personally, yet the monarchy's future image belongs increasingly to the Waleses. That is not necessarily a rejection of Camilla. It is the unavoidable logic of succession. But logic does not remove pain. And this is where the story becomes most human. The public often discusses royal power as if it moves cleanly from one figure to another. But inside a family, power is tangled with love, fear, memory, and loss. Camilla may want to protect Charles from appearing weakened. William may want to protect him from carrying too much. Catherine may want to protect William from being swallowed by responsibility before he has had time to process the emotional cost. Each instinct may be sincere, and yet those instincts may still pull in different directions. The palace, meanwhile, must think in colder terms. It has to consider what happens if public concern intensifies. It has to ensure that official duties continue without looking chaotic. It has to avoid any impression of secrecy while respecting medical privacy. It has to manage the emotional reality of the family while maintaining the constitutional image of stability. That is a great deal to ask from an institution that works best when the public sees calm rather than strain. The major turning point may therefore be the moment the royal household recognizes that William and Catherine are not merely assisting during a difficult period. They may be becoming the visible reassurance through which the monarchy explains its resilience. That does not mean Charles has been replaced. It does not mean his reign has lost meaning. In many ways, it may mean the opposite, that his reign is being protected by those closest to its future. But even protection can change the balance of a room. Once advisors begin thinking first about how William's presence will reassure the nation, once Catherine's calm becomes part of the emotional language of official appearances, once public attention begins to settle around the Wales household as the image of continuity, the monarchy enters a more complicated phase. The king remains central by law and duty, but the public imagination begins preparing for what comes next. That kind of preparation can be gentle, respectful, and necessary, but it is still a shift. And shifts create consequences. Senior royals may have to adjust their roles. Palace aides may begin planning with a different sense of urgency. Public expectations may settle more firmly on William. Catherine may be asked, silently or openly, to carry more emotional weight than ever before. Camilla may have to navigate the painful difference between personal closeness to Charles and institutional movement toward the future. None of this needs to be dramatic to be significant. In royal life, the quietest changes often become the most lasting. This is why the story has now moved beyond the language of health updates. It has become a question of how a monarchy prepares itself when the public is watching not only the king, but the people standing nearest to the future. The palace may want to project calm, but calm itself now depends on a delicate arrangement. Charles retaining dignity, William showing readiness, Catherine offering steadiness, and Camilla carrying private pain without allowing it to become public fracture. And that is where the final part of this story becomes impossible to ignore. Because the real consequence is not only what reports suggest about the king's condition or how the palace manages the days ahead. It is what this moment reveals about the future shape of the crown. A monarchy slowly learning that succession is not only a constitutional order, but an emotional passage, and one that may already be changing the House of Windsor before anyone is ready to say so aloud. And that emotional passage is what gives this final chapter its weight. Because if reports surrounding King Charles's health are accurate in their broader meaning, then this is not only a story about illness, concern, or palace planning. It is a story about what happens when the monarchy is forced to show its human side while still carrying the burden of continuity. The crown has always been built to outlast individual lives. That is its strength, but also its sorrow. One sovereign serves, another prepares, and the institution moves forward even when the family inside it would rather pause. In moments of national celebration, that continuity feels majestic. In moments of private fear, it can feel almost unbearable. And that is why this reported moment around Charles, William, Catherine, and Camilla has touched such a sensitive nerve. It reminds viewers that succession is not only a line in a history book. It is a lived experience, carried by people who love one another before they ever become symbols. For Charles, the meaning is especially poignant. He waited a lifetime to become king, shaping his identity around service long before the crown finally rested on him. His reign has not been defined by ease. It has unfolded amid family division, public expectation, and health concerns that have made the public more aware of his vulnerability than perhaps anyone expected so early in his time as monarch. And yet, if there is one quiet lesson in this chapter, it is that dignity does not always mean appearing untouched. Sometimes dignity means allowing the truth to be handled with care, even when that truth is painful. That is where William's role becomes so significant. The Prince of Wales is being watched not only as a son, but as the man who will one day inherit the full weight of the institution. Every serious discussion about the king's health pushes him closer to a role he has spent his life preparing for, but no preparation can remove the personal cost. A future king may be trained for duty, but a son is never trained to watch his father's strength become a matter of national concern. That tension may define William more than any speech or title ever could. Catherine's presence beside him gives the story its emotional balance. She represents steadiness without dominance, support without spectacle, and continuity without haste. In moments like this, her role is not simply ceremonial. It becomes deeply symbolic. She helps the public see the future as calm rather than abrupt, compassionate rather than cold. Yet that also means more pressure falls on her shoulders. If the Wales household is increasingly seen as the place where the nation finds reassurance, then Catherine is not only standing beside William. She is helping shape how the next chapter of the monarchy will feel. Camilla's place remains one of the most emotionally complex. She stands nearest to Charles in private life, yet the wider system naturally looks toward William and Catherine when the conversation turns to continuity. That shift may be necessary, but necessity does not make it painless. The Queen's role in this moment is not simply about influence or public positioning. It is about watching the man she has stood beside face limits no title can soften. Whatever observers believe about palace dynamics, that human reality must not be lost. And perhaps that is the broader meaning of the story. The monarchy is often discussed through power, titles, and succession, but its survival also depends on emotional intelligence. The public can accept difficulty. It can accept reduced schedules, careful adjustments, and even uncertainty when it believes the family is being honest within the boundaries of privacy. What damages trust is not vulnerability itself. It is the feeling that vulnerability is being hidden, staged, or used without warmth. If William and Catherine are becoming more central in moments of reassurance, then royal observers may be witnessing a gradual transformation in how the crown prepares for the future. Not a sudden replacement of Charles, not a dramatic ending to his reign, and not the certainty claimed by the most extreme reports, because Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed those versions. But possibly a quieter shift in emotional gravity, where the public still honors the king while increasingly looking to the Waleses for the shape of what comes next. That is a profound change. It means the future of the monarchy may not arrive all at once. It may arrive through small adjustments, through delegated duties, through who stands beside whom at difficult moments, through whose voice reassures the public, and through which family image begins to carry the nation's confidence. In royal history, the most important transitions are not always announced in grand terms. Sometimes they are recognized only later, when people look back and realize that the balance had already begun to move. Yet the final meaning should not be reduced to strategy. At the heart of the story is a family facing the reality that duty cannot protect anyone from fear. Charles remains king. William remains heir. Catherine remains the steady partner beside the future. Camilla remains the wife closest to the private pain. Each of them carries a different part of the same burden. And the monarchy, for all its gold, ceremony, and history, is being reminded that its strength depends on how gracefully those burdens are shared. So what do you think? Was this simply one difficult royal development, or does it point to a much larger shift inside the monarchy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep royal analysis, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next documentary-style royal story. Because in the House of Windsor, the future rarely arrives with one dramatic announcement. More often, it arrives quietly through duty, sorrow, loyalty, and the people brave enough to carry the crown before the world fully understands what has changed.